Hello everyone, this is Kelly Cahoot and I'd like to welcome you back to the Honeybee Stamps YouTube channel and another sneak peek of the Holiday Wishes release. Now normally I would be live right now, but the Honeybee Stamps team and I are out of town, and so I'm going to share this little sneak peek with you and I hope you enjoy it. First, let's do a little recap of all the little sneak peeks you've seen so far. So this is our Lovely Layers candy cane, the beautiful little 3-layer candy canes, the greenery that goes along with that, and then of course I have used our decorative star layering frames as a little base for my little candy cane bouquet. Next up, I made a card during one of our live streams that included the Let It Snow stamp set. So I did some embossing with those beautiful snowflake stamps, did a lot of ink blending around the edges, and then added this beautiful Believe in the Magic of Christmas sentiment. Now the next card is a beauty. I'm in love with the new Lovely Layers large snowflakes. They are layering snowflakes. You could either use them not layered and have all the little pieces all spread out, or you can layer them like I've done here. Again, I did an ink blended background and added the Let It Snow sentiment. And the latest project I shared in our live stream just this past Monday night was our vintage gift card box add-on for the holidays, and this is called Holiday Treats. You can see I've stamped that beautiful stamp that has the candy cane and the holly, and then filled my little vintage box with peppermints. Okay, now let's get busy on tonight's sneak peek, and I want to introduce you to the Lovely Layers deer. So in this die set there is a buck and a doe. Now I am going to create a card with the doe, but instead of having it like an adult deer, I'm going to make this into a little Christmas fawn. I've cut all of the die cuts for the doe out of craft cardstock, and I'm going to use my blending brushes to deepen up certain areas of the layering die cuts for my little deer. So I'm using gathered twigs and walnut stain, and you'll notice on the underside or the little face portion with the ears there, I've made it much darker. And then what's going to be more prominent or really stand out on the face, I've made that lighter in color. I've used the same brush and the same ink. I just brushed it on a lot lighter in order to get it lighter in shade. Next, I'm going to take the little die cuts out for all the little pieces of the face. Now, this whole deer, there are pieces for the little underside of the belly that may be lighter. There's even the little hooves that you could cut out of black cardstock. Now, some of these pieces I'm going to add on to the little deer, and then some of them I'm going to use a black gel pen to add those details in. They are all embossed. There's little places embossed in the base portion on the body of the deer that show you where all the little hooves go and things like that. Plus there's the great layering guide. With some of the portions I will glue together and add on, and then some of them I'm going to add in black gel pen. So I'm going to get busy here getting all my little die cuts out and ready, and this is really easy using the layering guide. I just followed along with that just like you would do in your craft room to get all the little pieces ready to go. You'll notice that when I start layering my little die cuts together, there's a few things that are going to be really helpful, and this is with any paper piecing or Lovely Layers sets. So liquid adhesive is going to be your best friend because that's going to allow you time to move everything around and get them layered exactly the way you want them. Also, a really nice pair of tweezers, like a pointy tipped reverse tweezers or a little picker tool. You can see there on the side of my desk there with my glue. I have the Trinity Stamps little picker. It has a wax end, looks like a pencil on one end, and then a little poker tool on the other. That's awfully handy as well to kind of use the wax tip to pick up little pieces, and then the little poker tool to kind of shimmy and move things around. So you'll notice that I go back into the little body with my brush and I'm just adding little bits of darkness and shading here and there. You're going to start noticing those little embossing lines kind of pop out on my little fawn as I work here. And I'm just getting all the little pieces. You can see I'm using my little fine point tweezers to pick pieces up. I can add adhesive and then I'm ready to put those down. And I'm being really careful on my layering guide to figure out, where the little pieces of the ears go. You'll see me glancing over to the layering guide. This is the first time that I have built this little deer. I've cut them out and I've looked and tested all of our dies. When I got them in, I was so excited. But this, you're seeing the first time that I've actually put the little deer together. And so it's so cute. I think that these are going to be wonderful, not only for the holidays, but for those of us that have outdoorsmen in our life that we like to make, a little more masculine cards. If you have hunters and fishermen and things like that in your families, then this little doe and buck are going to make some awesome masculine cards as well. Okay, I've got the little ear insets, the lighter portions, and you can see that little deer is really starting to come together. And then I'm adding on the lighter portions of the belly, and then there's also a little lighter portion of fur that's going to go right underneath the little doe or my little fawn's chin. The next, I'm going to pick up and start adding some more little portions to his face. So there is a really light section that's going to go down on his little muzzle or his little nose. And so I'm going to add just very fine little dot of adhesive there. And remember, it's really hard to see in this video, but all of these little die cuts have little embossed areas. So it's going to show you like where his little nose and his nostrils are. And then I'm going to take what is going to be the portion where his eyes are inset. And I'm going to place that onto his little face next. You can see I darkened up the little dot for the nose. That's going to go right there on that lighter or the lightest portion of his little face. And notice how handy my little pointy tweezers are. I can just layer that on and get his little nose laid down. Use my finger or a pokey tool. I got smart there and grabbed that little pokey tool to kind of press and shimmy that all into place. Again, this little nose portion is a part that you could totally take your gel pen and just add over the little embossed area where the nose goes. You can add that in if you wanted to do that. Okay, included in that die set, there are the eyes. And so this, I'm going to shimmy this around. The lighter portions are the where the eyes are actually going to sit on the face. And so I'm getting, for lack of a better word, like the little eye sockets that are lighter in color, the fur around the eyes. I'm getting those all set into place. And then I'm going to take the black gel pen. So this is where I'm going to add in those little details. There is a die for the little eyes that you could cut out of gray or black. I like adding little gel pen details to my little paper pieced animals and birds and flowers. And so I'm simply using the embossed areas in those little eye sockets as a guide on where to add my gel pen. Now I'm going to go back in with the little hooves, and you can see I'm just tracing that out with my gel pen. That is all embossed as well. So if you want to paper piece and add the little hoof die cuts in, you could totally do that. I kind of like the little shiny black hooves. I think they're adorable. Now I'm going to go in with a really light colored pencil to add some fur shading on the insides of the legs. And that's just where on a little baby deer, some of the portions would be lighter than the other. I'm also going to use the white pencil to go and lighten up the hair and those embossed areas right there in the chest. Once I get all of that lighter color pencil, I am going in simply on the embossed lines. You know I love to cheat and do this, so the darker brown pencil I'm going to use right in those embossed lines where his legs come up and meet his body and those curves are pressed into the paper. Next, I'm adding his little fawn dots, and you can see over to the far left, I have my cell phone out. I pulled up a picture of a baby deer, a fawn, to see what their little spots look like. Are they arranged in a certain pattern? Are they just random? And I'm using my white gel pen to add all those little baby spots onto the back of my little fawn. And then here is the finished little deer. Started out, you can make this a doe, so it could be your little female, or you can add little spots and little shading and make it a little Christmas fawn like I'm going to do. Okay, now it's time to dress this little guy up for the holidays. I have taken a wreath die, and this is from a die set that you will see later on in another sneak peek, but I am just going to ink this little wreath up with Rustic Wilderness ink and make that really nice and deep and beautiful green, and we're just going to deck this little baby deer out in for the holidays. So I'm going all over that die cut and getting that all pressed into the paper. Again, this little wreath has beautiful embossed detail, so it gives you the look of like an evergreen wreath, a pine, a little boxwood, something like that. And I'm going to carefully kind of zhuzh his little ears inside this wreath. Just barely bent his little ear back so I could get it over there, and then we can poke that little ear back up. But now he's gonna have that cute little wreath around his neck to go on the front of my card. I think he is just adorable. Okay, same thing goes with the little bow here. Now this bow goes with the same die set as the wreath, so you know you're gonna see some other good little die sets coming up, but this is a layering bow. I'm going to add the layers together. So there's a base layer that has the tails. There is the top layer that's going to give more details of the loops of the bow. And then there is the little tiny center there that I'm going to add next. Once I have my layered bow adhered and it is all ready to go, I am taking the greenery pieces or the pine pieces out of the Lovely Layers candy cane. So if you'll remember, it had all those little greenery pieces. There was this piece of pine, and there's also holly leaves and berries. Well, I'm going to take just the pine, and I have cut 4 pieces just out of white cardstock. I'm going to ink blend with Rustic Wilderness ink, and this is going to be a little bed of pine and limbs and things that my little fawn is going to stand in on the front of my card. Now you're noticing the decorative star layering frames. I always have to get that tongue twister out. But I have cut a red background, and then I have cut a beautiful kind of wintry wreath background out of our Adventure Awaits paper pad. So all that beautiful kind of outdoorsy paper that went with the owl, well, you can use that for holidays too. There's some Christmas designs in there as well, and I love this kind of snowy wreath background. I've rounded the corners of that, and it kind of mimics the edges of that red die cut that I have in the background. And now I'm going to make my little limbs or my little nest down there for my little fawn to stand. I'm using my liquid adhesive and kind of dotting that on the back and kind of dotting up the excess adhesive as it kind of comes out from around those little pine sprigs or little pine needles. And I'm going to get that all glued down. I'm going to press that glue into place and let it do its job, or it's going to stick to my fingers. You know, we have to add a blooper in here on just like our regular live streams. But I'm going to hold that into place now. Now I have it all stuck down nicely and ready to go. And I do snip apart another 2 little pieces of pine that I'm going to tuck in. I did add a little dot of adhesive behind the little deer's neck to hold that wreath into place. Now I'm going to add him with one of our tabbed foam dots. So he's going to be popped up just a little bit, and he's going to have just a nice little place to nestle in there. in his little snowy, wintry holiday background. I'm going to get him all pressed into place. Now, I mentioned that I did cut 4 pieces of the pine, and I'm going to nestle some in here in just a minute after I get my sentiment added. I'm going to add the little layering bow down there to the bottom of the little wreath, and that just gives him a little pop of red. It's going to tie into the background that we have cut with the decorative star frames. And now I'm going to work on my little sentiment. Now this sentiment comes from a sentiment set called Heart Be Light. And if you have, let's say, our winter birds, our lovely layers winter birds, or you pick up the deer, there's some other lovely layers sets that you'll see later on. I can't give away any more hints. But this sentiment set is beautiful for all of our little animals. It also has a lot of great just basic holiday sentiments. And so I've got that in my MISTI, and I'm going to stamp that in Lumberjack Plaid Red Oxide ink because, again, that's going to tie in with the color scheme that I have going on. And so I'm stamping that down, and I'm going to stamp it several times so I get a really nice impression. But this says, "Have yourself a merry little Christmas." And I thought that that little sentiment was so cute with the little fawn that we have going on our holiday card. And so once I am happy with how this is stamping, and you'll notice I'm just barely tapping on that sentiment. You don't want to squish that down because that's when your ink is going to kind of ooze out and squish around the sides. I'm going to cover this with clear embossing powder. It's going to do a couple of things. It's going to set up, or it's going to trap that oxide ink, and it's also going to give me that raised and shiny sentiment that's going to be perfect for a holiday card. So super simple to do. Just stamp in whatever color ink that you like, and then pour clear embossing powder over the top, and then heat set it. And then once I get this all nicely set up, it's going to be ready to die cut with the coordinating dies. So I'm just going to take some highlighter or easy C tape. You can see I'm getting my head way over the top. I'm going to tape down that sentiment, and then I can run this through my little bitty buzz cutter. After I pop my die out, I am going to put some narrow foam strips behind this little sentiment die cut. And that is just going to pop that up off of my card just a little bit, just like the little deer has that little piece of dimensional foam behind it. I like to do this, especially with my sentiments. It makes them stand out just a little bit. So I'm going to add this to the back of that narrow sentiment. I love these little narrow strips because they get in behind even tiny little sentiments like this. I'm going to pick that up with my tweezers, and then I can nestle that into place. I love using my tweezers for sentiments because it removes my fingers out of the way, and you can see I can really get over the top of my card and make sure I'm laying that down in just the right spot. And then our little deer's hooves are just going to kind of nestle right up there above the sentiment. I'm going to add this whole background onto a white card base. And so I can kind of pop that down, make sure everything is shimmied into place before that liquid adhesive has time to set up. And then I love just the classic red, green, and white with the little brown deer. I think he's so adorable. Now this is where I'm adding those final little pieces of pine. I have cut the full size, but I'm going to snip these off so I have a little bit of variation, and I'm going to glue these in and tuck them in behind the raised sentiment. Because I raised that sentiment up with those narrow foam strips, I'm able to kind of tuck these in. I wanted my little greenery pieces that he's standing in to be a little bit fuller. I thought they were a little bit sparse. So I'm snipping apart these die cuts of these pine needles and then just using certain portions of that to add in a little more fullness to the ground area where he's standing. Now to finish up my card, I am adding some snowy paste with a dry paintbrush. You can see this looks like almost like whipped cream or something like that. It's like a snowy texture paste, and I'm just going to hit the tips of those little pine needles and the little deer's ears and kind of down his back and on the wreath. Now here is a look at the finished card. So you can see we have our little Lovely Layers deer that I've created into a little fawn. We have the greenery from the Lovely Layers candy cane, and then of course the little wreath and the bow, and then our background is from our decorative star layering frames. I hope you've enjoyed this little sneak peek into another part of our Holiday Wishes release. I hope you'll join us on Monday for one more sneak peek, and I will be back in my craft room and ready to chat live with you. Thank you guys for joining me tonight, and I will talk to you soon. Have a good week, and bye-bye.